A paratrooper steps out of the side door of an aircraft in full equipment. From that second on, there is nothing to pull, nothing to switch on, and nothing to decide. There is about 40 seconds of air underneath. Almost everything people find interesting about airborne operations happens before that moment. The packing, the inspection, the aircraft. But the part the military actually spends weeks teaching is the 40 seconds after. Because that is the only part of the whole chain where nobody can help. The rigger is gone, the jumpmaster is still in the aircraft, and the person in the harness is now the entire system. So the design does something specific. It removes as many decisions from those seconds as possible and replaces them with habits trained until they need no thought at all. Those habits start before the door opens. 20 minutes out, the jumpmaster begins a fixed set of commands, and each one is answered by the whole cabin at once. Get ready. Outboard personnel, stand up. Hook up, check static lines. Check equipment, sound off for equipment check. The wording is the same in every unit and every aircraft. By the time the last command is given, nobody in that aircraft is being asked to think about their equipment anymore. They have checked it, been checked, and said out loud that it is done. Start with the parachute itself. On a military mass jump, nobody opens their own canopy. A cable runs the length of the cabin above the seats, and every jumper is hooked to it before the door opens. That yellow or red line running from the pack tray to the cable is the static line. One end stays with the aircraft. The other end is attached to the parachute on the jumper's back. When the jumper leaves, the line pays out to its full length, goes tight, and pulls the parachute out of its bag. The aircraft opens the canopy. The person does not. The line stays behind. Once the pass is finished, the crew inside pulls 60 static lines and 60 empty deployment bags back through the door, hand over hand, and stow them along the cabin. That detail is worth noticing. The equipment that opens the parachute never leaves the aircraft, so it can be inspected, counted, and used again by the next load of jumpers on the next pass. There is a reason it is built that way, and it is not distrust. It is altitude. A mass tactical jump is flown low, often around 800 feet above the ground. At that height, there is no room for a person to fall, orient themselves, find a handle, and pull. The canopy has to be opened within a few seconds of the door, every time, for everyone. So the timing is taken away from the jumper and given to the aircraft. 60 people exit in under a minute, and 60 canopies open at the same point in the same order. Subscribe. On a full aircraft, they go out of both side doors at once in two continuous streams, with a jumpmaster at each door controlling the spacing between people. That spacing is the whole reason it can be done at that rate. Bodies leaving a second apart end up separated in the air by a distance the crew can predict before the aircraft ever takes off. The exit itself has a shape. Hands on the reserve on the chest, elbows tight, chin down, body kept compact, and a hard push out and away from the aircraft. Then the jumper counts out loud. 1,000, 2,000, 3,000, 4,000. It sounds like a ritual. It is a clock. 4 seconds is how long the sequence needs. Fall away, line goes tight, bag strips off, canopy comes out and fills. If the count ends and nothing has happened, the jumper knows immediately without looking. The opening is not gentle. It is a fast, hard deceleration, and every part of the jumper's equipment is rigged and taped with that shock in mind. There is exactly one thing left in the jumper's hands, and it is the reserve strapped to their chest. Everything else on that jump is automatic. That one is deliberately not. It is the single decision the system keeps for the person, and the rest of the design exists to make sure the seconds around the opening are the only place a decision is ever needed. And from the end of that count, the 40 seconds are the jumper's own. They contain 4 jobs, and they are always done in the same order. Job 1. Look up. The first thing a paratrooper does after the opening is check the canopy above their head, and they check it in a fixed direction from the top down. They are looking for a full canopy with the right shape, suspension lines running clean from the harness to the skirt, and nothing lying across the top of the nylon. It has to be done with the eyes, because a canopy problem is not something you feel. A partially open canopy still holds a person up. It just holds them up faster. And the check happens exactly once in the first seconds, while the ground is still far enough away for it to matter. That is why it is drilled on the ground until it needs no prompting. Job 2. Look around. 60 people just left the same aircraft in under a minute, and every one of them is now descending inside the same block of air. Round canopies do not fly around each other. They fall through air, and when two of them get close, each one takes air away from the other. So the instruction is not to hold position. It is to get away from the nearest jumper immediately before the gap closes on its own. The tool for that is called a slip. The jumper reaches up, grabs the risers on one side and pulls them down, which tilts the canopy and pushes it sideways through the air. It is worth being clear about how little that is. A troop canopy on a mass jump is not a steerable wing. It is a brake, and the slip only nudges it. The jumper is mostly going where the air is going, which is why the real steering happened earlier in the aircraft, on the run into the drop zone. A large share of these jumps are also done at night, which takes away the last thing a person could use to judge a descent, being able to see the ground come up. The procedure does not change in the dark. Same count, same canopy check, same order, same landing. That is the point of building the whole thing out of habits rather than judgment. Job 3, prepare to land. This one starts higher than most people expect because the first part of it is getting the load off the body. A paratrooper on a tactical jump is carrying a rucksack that can weigh as much as a small person, plus a weapon in a padded case. None of it lands attached to the legs. At a set point in the descent, the jumper releases the rucksack and lets it down on a lowering line, so it hangs below them on about 15 feet of webbing. That does two things at once. It takes the mass away from the body, and it gives the jumper a warning. When the rucksack hits, the ground is one heartbeat away. Next, the jumper turns, not toward a landmark, toward the direction they are already drifting, so that the ground arrives in front of them rather than behind. Then the eyes go to the horizon. This is one of the most repeated corrections in airborne training, and it is completely counterintuitive. Watching the ground come up makes a person reach for it with their feet and stiffen their legs. Watching the horizon keeps the body loose and lets the training do the work. And feet and knees together. Said more times in an airborne course than any other phrase, because everything that follows depends on the body arriving as one piece instead of 5. Job 4 is the landing itself, and here the military teaches something that sounds wrong the first time you hear it. Paratroopers are not taught to land. They are taught to fall. The technique has a name, the parachute landing fall, and it has a fixed sequence. 5 points of the body touch the ground in order, one after another, along one side. Balls of the feet first, then the side of the calf, the side of the thigh, the side of the hip, and finally the back of the shoulder as the body rolls out flat. Each point takes a share of the energy and passes the rest along. Nothing absorbs the whole arrival, which is the entire idea behind it. And every one of those 5 contacts is on the side of the body. Never the front, never straight down through the legs and spine. The reason this needs weeks of training is not that the movement is complicated, it is that it argues with instinct. A falling human puts their legs down and tries to stand. Airborne school spends most of its ground week on teaching exactly that. Jumping off platforms, off-swing trainers, into gravel pits over and over, until falling sideways is the reflex. It is also the one part of the jump where the person genuinely matters. The descent rate is set by the canopy, not by the jumper. Everyone under the same parachute arrives at the same speed. Roughly what you would feel stepping off a wall about your own height, except with a rucksack and no way to slow down. So the speed is fixed and the weight is fixed. Technique is the only variable left, and that is why it gets the weeks. Then contact, the roll, and a stop. And at that exact moment, the jump is not over. The parachute is still up there, and it is still working. A canopy lying on an open field is a sail. Any wind at all will fill it again, and a filled canopy will pull a person across the ground on their back. So the first act after landing is not to stand up, and it is not to check yourself. It is to kill the canopy, and it starts before the roll has finished. The jumper grabs the lower suspension lines and hauls them in, hand over hand, pulling one side of the canopy down until the air spills out of it. In stronger wind, they get up and run around the downwind side of it, which collapses the whole thing at once. Then the harness comes off. The harness has release assemblies at the shoulders built for exactly this. A short, deliberate action on each one, and the canopy is no longer attached to the person. Reserve off the chest, harness off the legs, rucksack recovered from the end of the lowering line, weapon out of its case. There is a sequence for that too. The whole point of it is a number. Inside about a minute of landing, the person who was a passenger under a canopy has to be a functioning soldier again. And then they have to leave. The field they landed on is still being used because aircraft passes keep coming and more jumpers are still in the air above it. So nobody stands around admiring the landing. They move off the impact area, away from the line the aircraft is flying, without waiting to be told. On a large operation, the people are not even the first thing out of the sky. Vehicles, artillery, and supply bundles come down on the same field on earlier passes under their own cargo canopies. So the field a paratrooper lands on usually has heavy equipment sitting on it already, and the route off that field is planned around where that equipment was expected to come down. The canopy goes with them. It does not stay on the grass, and this is where a lot of people are surprised by how much work it is. Every canopy is accounted for, gathered up by the person who used it, stuffed into a kit bag, and carried off the field. Not collected later by somebody else. A drop zone after a mass jump is a field full of nylon, and clearing it is a formal part of the operation with its own collection point in its own vehicles. Meanwhile, the unit has a different problem. 60 people just landed, spread across a field measured in hundreds of meters, in the dark as often as not. They fixed that with assembly points, decided before anyone got on the aircraft. Every jumper knows which direction to walk and what to walk toward before they ever leave the ground. The aiming points can be terrain, a marked vehicle, a light with a specific color, a panel. The rule is that they are agreed in advance and understood by everyone. Then comes the count. Before that unit moves anywhere, somebody has to know that everyone who left the aircraft is standing on the assembly area. Accountability comes before speed every time. A unit that moves out fast and short of people has not completed the operation. It has started a search, which brings us to the ground itself, and to the part of these 40 seconds that was arranged weeks earlier by people who never jumped. A drop zone is not simply an empty field somebody liked the look of. It is surveyed and approved with a recorded size, a usable surface, and a list of obstacles. On the day, it is controlled from the ground by a drop zone safety officer and a small team who are standing on that field long before the aircraft arrives. They measure the surface wind, and the wind has a published limit. For a jump with combat equipment, the number is low, in the range of a stiff breeze. If the wind is over the limit, the jump does not happen. That call belongs to the people standing on the grass, not to the crew in the aircraft. They also answer a question no forecast can. On the first pass, a weighted streamer goes out of the door, falls at about the rate of a jumper, and shows where the air actually takes things. Where that streamer lands sets the release point for everybody else. The correction happens in the aircraft, on the run-in, before a single person steps out. So look at the whole chain. A rigger packed the canopy. A jumpmaster checked the body wearing it. Air crew flew the line. A team on the ground measured the wind and set the point. All of it exists so that the person in the doorway has as little as possible left to decide. 4 jobs, 1 order, and a landing trained as a fall rather than a landing. And when it is over, 60 parachutes come off that field in kit bags. Next time we follow them back, how a used canopy is turned in, opened out on a table, inspected, repacked and signed for before anyone jumps it again. Subscribe to Duty Station.
Everything. Yeah.